Blog Talk Radio.
You are now listening to True Murder, the most shocking killers in true crime history and the authors that have written about them. Gacy, Bundy, Dahmer, The Night Stalker, BTK. Every week, another fascinating author talking about the most shocking and infamous killers in true crime history. True Murder, with your host, journalist and author, Dan Zupansky.
Good evening. This is your host, Dan Zupansky, for the program True Murder, the most shocking killers in true crime history, and the authors that have written about them. Beau Webster is a Tallahassee, Florida-based private investigator who is a former officer with the Fort Lauderdale Police Department. Like Travis McGee, the famous fictional private investigator created by John D. McDonald, Webster prowls the southern tier of the U.S., working for those in need of justice. Like Kendrick Johnson, a Valdosta, Georgia teenager, Johnson, an African-American, was found dead in the gym of the high school he attended, rolled up in a gym mat. Investigating, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation claimed Johnson died accidentally when he crawled into the mat and smothered. What they didn't explain was why his face was bludgeoned and bloody and why he had a stab wound on his arm. Working for the Johnson family attorney, Webster has uncovered a conspiracy by mostly white high school athletes that led to Johnson's death and the refusal of the local authorities to indict them, making this a civil rights case. The program today is called The Murder of Kendrick Johnson, that's with a question mark, with my special guest, journalists and authors, Fred Rosen and Beau Webster. Welcome to the program, gentlemen, and thank you for agreeing to this interview.
Well, thank you, Dan. Good to be on again.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Grant. Now let's just get right to this. This is a story that I just became familiar with, courtesy of my friend Fred Rosen, and so maybe you can start with this, Beau. Tell us how you became first involved with this. What compelled you to get involved with this story? When did you hear about this? And tell us a little bit about the background, how you first became involved with this story.
Well, it was probably back in February, and I had received a call from actually Mr. Shaveen King, who is the attorney that's representing the family, the Johnson family in Valdosta, Georgia. And Mr. King notified me and briefly spoke, asked me if I would be interested in looking at the case and possibly representing his law firm and representing the Johnson family. And I knew what case he was referring to because I had seen it on the news. It had been, head topics for a few nights in the Florida market, and it intrigued me. And at the very beginning, I just thought that it was a rather peculiar case. And when Mr. King asked me if I would be interested in, representing them, I said yes, I would. And so we actually met a few days later in Valdosta, Georgia, with the family, and got to know everyone and started getting information pertaining to the case, and that's what started our investigation. There was also another investigator on the case that was hired out of Jacksonville, Mr. Lee, and Mr. Lee and myself, we started the investigation.
Now, Fred, welcome back to the program. How did you get involved with this? How did you get involved with this story, and what was how did your relationship with Beau Webster develop, and where did you find Beau? Tell us a little bit about that background and what this story means to you, and tell us about that.
Well, actually, the last couple of times that I've been on your show,
We've talked about your favorite serial killer and mine, Gary Hilton. And Beau and I met in a courtroom in Florida where Gary was being tried for murder and ultimately was sentenced to death. And we sort of hit it off. And, you know, and every time I talk to Beau, whenever I call Beau up, I always ask for Jim Rockford, you know. And and we hit it off. And one day, it must be a couple of months ago now, I guess, Beau called me and told me about the Kendrick Johnson case. And I won't say that I was shocked. I was angry because having dealt with the authorities in Georgia, I'm used to them stonewalling on certain cases, as they did on the Meredith Emerson case involving Gary Hilton. But this was clearly a situation where a murder was committed, and the authorities are refusing to investigate and prosecute. And when Beau told me about this, Dan, all I could do is think to myself, you know, I'm a parent. I have a child. How do these people feel? And who's going to try and get justice for this child? And I knew and it was one of those situations again where I knew I couldn't walk away. It's really like that. And so Beau and I just started chatting about it, and I will do an article about this and maybe a book, but right now we're sort of concentrating on trying to get the authorities to do the right thing, which I do not think they're going to do in Georgia. I think this is a civil rights case. Beau can comment better than I can on it, but I do believe that what we're looking at is a situation like that which existed in the United States in the 1960s when justice was denied to those who were African American, and of course the civil rights workers who were killed, and they tried to prosecute the bad guys in that case in state court, and it didn't work. And that was the first time, as far as I can recall, that the feds came in and they went with a civil rights prosecution, and I think that's the direction that this is going in.
Well, we won't get to I know there was a decision, or at least there was something that went on in May concerning attorneys looking at or reviewing the case, but we won't get to that quite yet because for those listeners, we have a lot of fans in Australia and the United Kingdom and all over the world. So let's go back, Beau, because you have to look at this information. You looked at the initial news reports, of course, that, again, outrage, anger, and not so much surprise, but, again, shock. Tell us what the police reports were about the crime itself, and then I'll have some questions for you, because it's amazing what the Sheriff's Department initial release is about the case and some of their supposition. So tell us about Kendrick Johnson. Give us a little bit of background about what this case really was, his age, circumstances. Tell us about that, Beau.
Well, Kendrick Johnson was a student enrolled at Lowndes County High School in Valdosta, Georgia, and he was a 17-year-old black male that, from all indications, he was a good student, a very quiet young man, kind of stayed to himself, was very athletic. I know he played football and basketball and, had dreams of maybe becoming a college player and then future dreams on to maybe the NFL. And they said that, he had the talent to maybe live those dreams. So school had just come back in session from the holiday break, and they'd only been back in school a couple of days, 1 or 2 days, and during third or fourth block, which would be anywhere from like 1:30 to 3 o'clock on Thursday afternoon, Kendrick Johnson went missing and never showed up for his fourth block class. And he, I guess, according to the family and according to Mr. Kenneth and Jackie Johnson, who were the parents of the deceased, was that he always notified his parents if he was going to be late coming home from school for maybe, a sports activity or for whatever reason. He would call and let them know that he would be running late, and they did not receive a phone call from Kendrick that evening, and they became concerned because it was out of the ordinary for him to act like that. And as the night got later, there were still no signs of Kendrick, no phone calls, and the parents were alarmed and making phone calls throughout the night and could not locate their son. And that's when the next morning at about 9:30 a.m., which would be January 11th on a Friday morning, his body was discovered inside the gymnasium.
Now, let me ask this question, because this is something that, this is the first question I would have. Of all the places that they can look for this young man, why did they look in the gym? Because then you can explain exactly the circumstances of the crime scene itself, how he was found in terms of in this rolled up mat, as we allude to in the opening. But tell us, why did they search the gym, and how did they get to that? Of all the places they could be looking for a young man that's missing, why the gymnasium?
Well, they had opened the gym that morning for activities to inside the gym that Friday morning. There would have been scheduled activities, and there was a couple of students that had, when they opened the gym, had discovered that they had seen someone's feet. Actually, they were stocking feet inside of a rolled-up mat, which the mat would be a wrestling mat that a lot of the schools have. They rolled up these gym mats in a tight roll, and they band them up, and that's where his stocking feet were seen partially sticking out of the mat.
Can I add something to that, Dan?
Yeah, sure.
Just, in the detail that Beau is going into, just think about this for a second. The bad guys killed this kid, and they got enough nerve to dump him in this mat with his feet sticking out, as if there's with impunity. That's what gets me about this. Okay, so they dump him. It's like they're saying, it's like they're thumbing their nose. They didn't try to get rid of the body. They deliberately dispose, quote unquote, of the body in such a way that they know people are going to find it. Now you got to wonder why it is that they thought they could get away with it.
Correct.
Okay. Now let's go back, Beau, because this story is just beginning for those that don't know anything about this story. How do they find the young? Again, you say you open up the gym, his feet are sticking out without shoes on, and that's important to later in the sheriff's speculation, I guess, as to what may or may not have happened. He's rolled up in the mat. Now these are I was in high school, so I know these mats. Now, how was the condition of the body? Pardon me. What was the condition of the body when he was found? Other than being his feet hanging out of that mat, what was the condition of the body, and in particular, what was the state of Kendrick Johnson's face?
Well, the body, was certainly what they were saying is that when they found the body, he was vertically upside down in the core of the mat, And the core of these mats, I've tried to get into the core of the mat. Mr. Johnson has tried on several occasions to get into the core of the mat, and there's no way feasibly. I mean, you can barely get a human head inside that mat. And then when your shoulders are, say, 19 inches across, there's just no way that the human body is going to get into the core of that mat. And they're saying that he was found vertically standing upright with his head down on the hard surface of the gymnasium floor, and that he was trying to retrieve tennis shoes from the inside of the mat. Now, it's very obvious with his intellect, as smart as he was, and most kids his size, he was a strong young man, that if you needed to retrieve your tennis shoes from inside of the core of the mat, you would either knock the mat down and grab the shoes, or you would unroll it, but you wouldn't climb inside of the mat to retrieve your tennis shoes and get wedged inside of the core of that mat. And you can't fit inside the core of the mat anyway. I mean, it's impossible.
Now, this idea that he got into the core of the mat and the runner, this is from the Lowndes County Sheriff's Department and from the sheriff himself. Tell us how they come to this conclusion. This is his supposition, his speculation, his idea of what may have happened to explain again, and then tell us again, what was the condition of Kendrick Johnson's face, according to witnesses?
Well, according to witnesses, the face was, a terrible mess. It was very distorted. He had perfect teeth because he had just gotten out of braces, so his teeth were in good shape, and his teeth were kicked in, and his face was, it was just an awful sight, and there's just no way that the human body, being in that gymnasium for a short period of time, would look like his face looked, according to witnesses that saw the face and saw the body.
And the sheriff had also made a supposition that somehow or other he went to his regular classes, as reported. He must have skipped his other classes, like you say, from maybe 1:30 or 2 o'clock, went into the gym alone for some unknown reason, went up top and sat up top these mats. His shoe may have fallen off, and then he dove in to get that shoe and suffocated. Some of the issues that the family is raising, and of course that you have probably helped to raise these issues, is when the coroner for the county was called or not called. So tell us a little bit about that issue, because that is a very, very important issue, I would think. You could talk about that.
It is, and that's what is so sad about this story as well, is because the body was discovered around 9:30 a.m. on Friday morning, and the coroner didn't arrive on the scene till about 4:30 that afternoon, which the coroner is usually the first person to be notified. And why did it take so long for the coroner to get there? Well, he was notified later that day, and from what eyewitnesses are saying and students, was that there was people inside of that gym throughout the day, walking in and outside of the gymnasium. While there's been some type of a crime committed, and they said that no one knows why he reached inside of the core of the mat to retrieve his shoes. No one will know except for the good Lord, and there's just no way that this could happen. And then why the coroner is notified so late in the day. And then a lot of the physical evidence, we cannot get our hands on any of the physical evidence to determine any kind of DNA. So that's where they're at with that.
Well, it would also seem to me that from, as you described this, of course, Beau, that the crime scene was contaminated continually, wasn't it?
Well, it would have to be because, there were so many people that were in and out of that gymnasium on that Friday. And another sad thing is that the mother was trying to find out where her son is that whole night and the next morning, along with Mr. Johnson. And Jackie Johnson, the mother, is asking questions to the school board and the school officials, where's my son? And then when they finally found the body, Mrs. Johnson was told by school officials that, that was her son. She actually accidentally found out around 3 o'clock in the afternoon that was her son, and they, just walked up to her and gave her a hug, and she knew right away because she had questioned the fact that, is that my son? And they said, yes, I'm awfully sorry. And, we all have children, and it's really sad when your child goes missing for, a period of hours and into the late night and early morning, and then they find a body, and they can't even notify you that that is your son. You're accidentally told by a school official, and then the parents were still not allowed to identify or see the body that afternoon or that evening. It was a couple days later. It was
oh my God!
I believe it was Sunday afternoon, when Mr. Kenneth Johnson finally was able to identify his son's body.
God.
Now, what did that's amazing, really. What was the coroner's report after he finally did get around to doing an autopsy? What was his conclusion? And again, what did he make of what was the statement in the report regarding the lacerations on the face and the body?
To be honest, I have not even seen that report. So much of the evidence and all the information pertaining to this particular crime has not been turned over. It might have been turned over in the last couple of days to Mr. King, but we've been waiting for months, for the autopsy report, the toxicology report, and any information that can be given to us pertaining to our investigation on this particular crime. And I don't know why, it just doesn't take this long for information to get out as to what the cause of death is. And, we still, as of this minute, I still have not seen any reports pertaining to the death of Kendrick Johnson. I've also I went to the school with the family and with Mr. King, the attorney that's representing the family, and we went to the school one afternoon, and we were told that we could go inside the gymnasium to take photographs, to look at the scene, to take measurements, do whatever we had to do to investigate the scene. And we were turned away. The family and Mr. King were allowed to go in the gymnasium, but the school officials told the two investigators, myself and Mr. Lee, that we were not allowed. And Mr. King's understanding was that we were going in there that day, and they said, no, you're forbidden to go into the school gym. We will let you know next week, which was the following week, as to when you can let your investigators in. And as of last week was the first time that we stepped foot inside that gymnasium to take a look at that whole area, to take photos, to look at any surveillance cameras, to look at the maps. Last week was the first time that we were allowed to go in there.
Amazing. Now, a question for you, Fred, because you are familiar with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation intimately, and you've been critical of them. When did they get involved with this case, and why did they get involved so early? Give us some of the details of how they got involved, why they got involved, and then what they have to say.
I'll actually defer on that one to Beau, because he has more of the details on that about how they got involved. But typically, what happens in the state of Georgia is that when you have a death in a small town that where the local police might not have the investigative resources to get to the bottom of something, that is generally when the GBI is called in. But I'm sure Beau can talk even better about that.
No, that's correct. And GBI, they are notified immediately, when there's a death or a suspicious death or any kind of death usually. And they were notified. And, all the law enforcement agencies that were within that, were within Valdosta in their jurisdictional boundaries were notified. And other than GBI, sending the body to their lab for future testing, I don't really know the involvement of GBI because, like I said, I haven't been able to read or see any of these reports, and they have not been available to us. And Mr. King had to draw up, a lot of motions to request certain things, and we're just waiting to get, some of these reports back.
So, in other words, what we're looking at here. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Dan. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Fred.
I was just going to say, what we're looking at here is a situation where I think we can all say we have a suspicious death that occurred at the beginning of 2013. And so far, we don't have an autopsy report or a tox screen that has been released publicly, nor have the GBI investigations, the GBI investigation has any detail come out from this. And here we are in the 6th month of the year. Now,
correct.
That is absolutely, you'll stop me, Dan, because I tend to go on my soapbox here. But that is inexcusable, okay? And, it's interesting that you mentioned earlier about how many listeners we have all over the world, and all I can think to myself is, my God, people listening to us, certainly in Canada, where you are, they're listening in England, they're listening in Australia, and now what are they going to be thinking of the United States, for God's sakes, that something like this can happen in 2013? Okay, I'm off my soapbox.
Okay.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
No, given this case, it's interesting and it's heartbreaking at the same time to see the Johnson family, Kenneth Johnson and the mother and the entire family holding arms and then getting arrested at the courthouse, stopping people from entering, but really, just protesting the death of their son, and then they want a further investigation. So tell us what the family really wants, and of course we can already see from the media has caught on to this, but really the family and its supporters have been protesting, and we're not talking about once in a while protests. This is a constant protest. So tell us about the magnitude of this story in Georgia, and if it's catching on here, and the effort by the family to try to get justice for their son.
Well, and that's all what the family is looking for. I mean, they have not even been able to grieve over this because all of this has taken place in the last 6 months, and there's unanswered questions. And, I mean, they're going through this process every day. I think unless something has changed, they are out. They're really not. I mean, it's really not even a protest. They're just sitting out on the corners downtown with with banners and with signs, wanting justice and wanting to know what happened to their son. And any rightful family, any parent in this country, in this world, would want to know the same thing. And they're not getting the answers, and if the answers are forthcoming, they're coming awfully slow. And they've had a couple of rallies where Al Sharpton's been involved recently, probably in the last month, and they're getting a lot of recognition around the country now. The national media has jumped on board here, and I think that's really what needs to happen, because they just want answers, and it's a sad thing because they've got other children that attend school there, and from talking to students, Kendrick was a well-liked young man, and it's just a sad thing the way his life was taken this way.
I wanted to also mention, because I had forgotten when we were discussing it at the time, that one of the most dramatic things and compelling evidence like I'd mentioned to you before the program began, is the photo of Kendrick Johnson, the before and after. This is a handsome young man, 17 years old, athletic, and he's a good-looking kid. Like you say, he just got his braces off, so he's a good-looking kid. And then they show the before and after. And I would like to see, I dare say there's no autopsy report or coroner's report that's going to try to explain some kind of phenomena of falling into a mat and having, like you say, his teeth kicked out. But the damage to this boy's face is all the evidence almost anyone ever needs. You could say this is just emotional, but I'd like to see somebody explain that, really.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, after looking at the photo of the face, there's just no way. I've seen a lot of bodies, and this is just gruesome. And there's no way that being turned upside down in a mat, the face can look like this, and the body from really about the lower abdomen up. There's no way. And people in that town are scared to death. They're starting to become more vocal and becoming more aware of what's going on and wanting to talk to authorities. But it's been probably the most difficult case that I've ever worked, because they're so close-lipped. They work very close-lipped at first. They just don't know who to trust, and it takes them a long time to get that trust built up in them, that they'll be able to talk. And that's what we're asking for. We just need the help of the community to come out, and if you know anything, to please share those thoughts with us and give us the information that we need.
Now, before we get into, because we alluded to that they're definitely, through this investigation, through your investigation, and through all the evidence, inference, and just information that you have gathered, that you have a good idea of what did happen, and probably some idea of who might have done this and why. But I wanted to ask about one of the other key issues is that, and so I want whoever can explain this, Fred or Beau, about the Lounsden High School. They have video of Kendrick Johnson apparently, but they refuse to release this. Now, is there a refusal to release to you as an investigator and the family and the attorney, or is it a refusal to release it to the police, or have they released it to the police? Explain that story, please.
Well, we don't really know. When we were in the gymnasium about 10 days ago for the first time, there are surveillance cameras inside the gym. In the corners, when you first come into the door, those particular surveillance cameras would grab whoever is walking into the gymnasium at either entrance door. And like I said, I was not in there after this incident took place, so I really can't tell you, and none of us can tell you exactly where those cameras were located, but according to witnesses, those cameras are strategically placed so that they get every bit of activity that comes in and out of that gymnasium and those two doors. And that's one of the first things you ask for at a crime scene when you have surveillance cameras, is to determine who's walked in and out of there and try to get a visual as to the people that have come in and out of there. And we were told that at that particular time, I guess the tape has been either eradicated, but as of right now, I have not seen any evidence showing any movement in that gym from the time that Kendrick Johnson went missing until the time his body was found.
Which means if those cameras were operating on a regular basis, right? Mm-hmm. If those cameras are operating on a regular basis, they, as Beau says, they not only would have shown who went into the gym, they would show what happened to Kendrick Johnson. And if that tape no longer exists, well, you don't have to be a PhD to figure out what's going on here, guys. Somebody did something with that tape. And so the next question, of course, and I know you'll get into this, Dan, is, okay, what happened to the tape and why? The why is, to me, the most important. Why are they sitting on their heels? Why are they not allowing this evidence to go public? And I think, and again, I will say that, this is a situation that could not happen in too many other places that I know of in my experience investigating murders in the United States. And that if there's going to be a cover-up, it's going to be in Georgia, because that is something that has happened before, it's happening now, and it will happen again.
No, you're right.
Like you said, Fred, though.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Like I said, the national media has become interested in this case, and sometimes the national media looks at how the news media responds in Georgia before the national media obviously gets involved and thinks it's a story that's worthwhile. And then again, people like Al Sharpton gotten into the picture always gets national media, cameras to be involved. So, is the state and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation or the sheriff's department there, the county sheriff, or anybody feeling any kind of heat from this? Because it seems when you get that national media, it seems they're as powerful as anything in terms of sometimes enabling things to be overturned or investigations to go forward that it seemed that they wouldn't go forward without the big protest, which leads to pressure, which leads to people like Al Sharpton. So do you think there is this kind of pressure mounting, and do you see any evidence of that?
Well, I would think that there is. I have not had any contact with the local authorities. Mr. King, has done that, and that's really his position. But I know that the media coverage has been quite extensive in the last month or so. I know it's still being covered on local network and local news, from time to time, and maybe several times a week. And then I know CNN had a couple of coverages in the last probably couple weeks. So it is starting to get exposure, around the country. And I think really that's what's got to happen. School, it's just kind of ironic, too, that so much of this, no information was turned over or given while school was in session. And a little bit of information is released after school is out for the summer. And, it seems that now that the students are out, that there's information forthcoming, and it's just very odd that for like 5.5 months you couldn't get any information from anyone, and I think that they were just waiting for school to be through and for summer to begin, and all students would not be, on the school grounds every day.
There's something, Dan, if I may add, regarding your question about what kind of pressure can be put by the national media.
Right.
While it has received, as Beau says, the case has received some attention, in many ways this has gone under the radar. And the thing to bear in mind is this, and now I'll talk from personal experience, which is, and I don't recall if I mentioned this specifically when I was on last time, but this. When I was investigating the murder of Meredith Emerson in Georgia by Gary Hilton, and I discovered that Meredith Emerson should still be alive and that the Georgia Bureau of Investigation messed up the investigation, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which you would think is a great metropolitan newspaper, went to the GBI to ask for comment. And they said, if you publish this story that's critical of us, we are going to cut you off. They told this to the editor I was working with. And the AJC then killed the story. So we're talking about a situation, as Beau says, where people are scared and where the rule of law does not necessarily apply. What applies is who's got the clout, and the use of fear and intimidation, especially when people in authority might be held accountable to something they have not done. And that's what we're seeing in this particular situation.
Yeah.
Did I say that okay?
Absolutely.
Sure. Now,
okay,
before, let's...
Yeah.
Sorry, Fred, go ahead.
No. You know me. I just keep going on and on.
Now, let's get to some of the stuff that we alluded to, because to be really fair, we've said there is a conspiracy. There are some white students. This has been a murder. This is not an accident. This is not a positional asphyxiation, as the coroner concluded, that he suffocated in this mat somehow. Everybody seems to be clear that that's not the case. Now, I know you can't get into details, this John Doe and that John Doe did this at that time, but from your inferences, from your own supposition, from your own speculation, and from your own good investigation, what do you think most likely happened to Kendrick Johnson that fateful day?
Yeah.
Well, we've got people of interest that we're looking at, but I'm not going to get into any names or any information like that. We feel strongly that he was enticed into that gym, and he was beaten severely, and there was some physical evidence there that with blood that shows that he was beaten, and it would take, according to Mr. Johnson, it would take several good-sized guys to handle his son Kendrick, because his dad taught him how to defend himself, and being as athletic as he was, and the strong young man that one or two people would not be able to do this to him. It would take 3, 4, maybe even more. But that's all I can reflect on that.
Now, Fred, you've dealt with the mind of a serial killer, and whether it's a serial killer or a single killer or a psychopathic killer or the person that has the ability to kill. Certainly, somebody had the ability here, according to this scenario you guys are creating, which it seems plausible to me. What would be the possible? Again, I know you can't lay it all out here, but what is the idea of roughly of why he was killed and why he was enticed in this gym?
Yeah, I think that there. Bo, of course, can comment more on that, but I think that what happened. Let's just work backwards, okay? You talked about the injuries to the face, so I think and Bo also talked about the injuries to the body. So what we're looking at is a situation where at least 3, as Bo says, at least 3 individuals would have to hold down Kendrick Johnson. They beat him, and given the nature of the injuries, he was bludgeoned with something. So let's look at that now. Why does somebody do something like that? He probably had some sort of disagreement with the individuals involved, but it must have been a major disagreement. Okay, let's look at that. But, and this is the part that is going to play out as we go further along, which is this. Supposing, let's just say that, that he was lured into the gym and somebody beat the crap out of him, okay? Then here's the thing. Is it first-degree murder? Is it second-degree murder? Is it third-degree murder? If somebody lured, and I think the answer to that question, and this is, again, very, very, very important because the state of Georgia has the death penalty and they use it. So if he is lured in to that gym for the purpose of committing a felony, and in the process of committing that felony, they form the resolution to kill him. Last time I looked, that's first-degree murder, and every single one of those individuals involved could be charged with murder 1. And I think that's where we start getting into why there has been, and I don't like using that word conspiracy, but there is a conspiracy of silence, because if these individuals are then prosecuted, it's very possible that somebody could wind up going to the death chamber. And so now we then have to question, okay, if that's the case, who put the fix in? And why was the fix put in? That is the question. And the fact that Kendrick Johnson is African American, and that regardless of the color of the skin of the bad guys, the mere fact that the authorities in that county and that state will not move forward makes it a civil rights violation, which means the federal government has to come in. Unless the state, turns around and does the right thing, and I'm not going to hold my breath on that.
Correct.
Now,
another sad thing is that we have gone to the school board officials, and we've also contacted the county commissioners, and we've asked for both of those organizations to give us a meeting so that we could sit down and ask, what exactly happened that day, because there was a walkthrough at the gymnasium a couple of days after the body was found, that they actually had a walkthrough to show people, what took place inside the gymnasium. And we called the county officials and the school board officials to ask them for a meeting, and we were told that we could have that meeting, and then all of a sudden that meeting was going to be. Let's see, we spoke to the school board officials and the county commissioners on a Friday morning, and we were asking for the following week. And to this minute, and that's been a couple of months ago, they have not returned our phone call and given us a courtesy call to say that, you know, they're not going to have a meeting or for whatever reason, but we have had no meeting with any county officials whatsoever pertaining to this case.
Now, this is a question people might ask, and especially me, not knowing the racial makeup of this small town. Not everybody knows the history of Georgia in terms of race relations, but we won't get into that. But what was this sort of the mood at the high school? What was it a big? What was the racial makeup of this small town and this high school? And was there any kind of racial tension that was more evident than anywhere else? And I guess in typical America.
Great question.
No, there hasn't been any racial tension whatsoever. We've taken statements from a lot of students, both on in the black community and the white community, and it's not amazing to me, but it's very interesting that I want the black community to know that there's many, many, many white people out there that are very interested in this case. And most of these people have children, and they sympathize with this family, and they want justice done just like everybody else. And it's not a racial thing. It's not white on black or black on white. And, we just want answers, and we want to get to the bottom of this, and justice needs to be done. But like I said, the people are starting to talk, but we just I don't know. It's just very depressing that it's taking so long to get answers where a young life was taken for no reason whatsoever.
In your experience, Fred, and because I'm just thinking and theorizing myself, is there any possibility, because it's a small town, that somebody in law enforcement is connected to one of the suspects? Because it seems somebody's really... Okay.
Sure, yes. Of course, absolutely. There's no difference in Georgia versus Winnipeg versus New South Wales. There's someplace in this whole process, someplace, there is somebody who is connected in some way, and I'm speculating, Dan, okay, but I think it's a pretty logical speculation to say, wait a second, somebody is murdered and we don't do anything. Well, usually that happens when you're trying to protect somebody. You're trying to protect somebody, and I think that some of the individuals involved might have some protection. Plus, one thing Beau pointed out to me, which is that this particular high school has turned out quite a few athletes that have gone professional. So we have that other culture, that athletic culture, if you will, that as we all know, just take a look at Penn State, that is protected by the individuals in power. But the one thing to bear in mind is this. Regardless of that, and as Beau says, there isn't racial tension per se in the town. But regardless of that, it is still a civil rights case when you refuse to investigate and prosecute, and that's when it becomes incumbent upon our federal government to step in and do something about it if the state won't. Otherwise, we're going back to the 1960s, and people are going to get away with murder. Not this time.
Correct.
Now the attorneys for the U.S. attorneys looking into this case, reviewing this case, they started sometime in the spring, not too long ago, and so obviously nobody's heard any information. I think Beau spoke about this, that you're not going to really get updates from these people. But is there any plan how long this is going to take, or the breadth and the length of this investigation, or any details about how this investigation and how far they're going to go into this investigation and how long it may last?
Well, we're hoping that in the next week or two things will start accelerating and moving forward. I mean, it's ambiguous right now to determine. We've got a lot of good information, and we've got all this good information. We're hoping that will be turned over to DOJ, Department of Justice, and they are going to take a serious look at this and move forward. It just looks like in all of our eyes, it looks like a major cover-up that for whoever could be involved. It's just a very odd case that everything has moved so slowly and no one has given us any cooperation, and that they had to wait for school to be out for the summer. It's just really frustrating. And we don't even know where the mat is. We don't even know where the clothing is that the young man was wearing at the time that his body was found. There's no physical evidence right now to put our hands on and test for DNA.
Which means they're repressing physical evidence.
Correct.
So how confident are you that they're taking seriously the information and evidence that you, or would-be evidence that you bring to these Department of Justice officials? Are they independent from each other? Or do you just have to bring this information to them? But are they, so far, have they acted in a cooperative way and willing to take a look at your information / evidence?
They're very interested, and Mr. King will, be pursuing that, and I'm sure he has been, in the last couple of weeks. And I feel strongly that, Department of Justice will get involved in it, and we will turn over all of our information to them and let them move forward with it, and we'll continue to do our investigation like we have been.
And I might add as well that I too have confidence, believe it or not, that the Department of Justice is going to do the right thing. But bear in mind that they can only go so far in terms of prosecution. The penalty, the only thing that they can prosecute the bad guys on, if once they're identified, is denying Mr. Johnson his civil rights, which is no place near what would happen if somebody was indicted for murder. So you're talking about, in the 1960s when the civil rights workers were killed and some of the bad guys were eventually tried in federal court, they got about 4 years. That's it, 4 years. So,
wow.
With all of this, of this machinery moving forward, yes, it would be we would get a sense of justice if the bad guys are indicted in federal court, but it still means that the state court is not doing its job. And one more time, we're in the 21st century, and somebody needs to explain this to me. I don't understand it. I mean, it's sad, it's depressing, and if we allow our emotions that way to get a hold of us, then it'll push us back. So what we have to do is push those emotions aside, and simply push forward and try to get as much justice as we can for Mr. Johnson.
Well, you're absolutely right, and the thing that you try to stress to everyone, when you're talking to witnesses that might have some good, valuable information for you pertaining to the case, is that your child and your students are going to school possibly with a murderer or murderers, and, do you want that? I mean, if it happened once, it could certainly happen again. And I know for a fact that I wouldn't want my children to be going to school on a regular basis with someone that I know that might be sitting right next to them that created such a terrible tragedy. And I want the best for the family, and we need to get more evidence, and we need help from the community, and anyone that can give us any information, we would certainly appreciate if you would come forward. And I would like to just take a moment to also explain a case that I'm getting ready to work on up in the Macon, Georgia area, which is a 10-year cold case. And the mother had a 24-year-old son that was murdered in Macon, Georgia, and his body was found in the river downtown Macon, Georgia. His body was, his hands were handcuffed, and his legs were shackled, and his body was shot 3 or 4 times. And there's another terrible tragedy that it's a cold case, and the family wants us to get involved and try to open up that case. But this is what's happening in Georgia. It's a shame.
It's interesting, too, that for me is that the crime, obviously, the murder of this young man, regardless of motive, is a heinous and horrible crime. And I really do feel for the family. It's sad, like you say, a very sad story. But what I'm most outraged is the cover-up here, because this is one of those blatant cover-ups. Anybody, again, looks at the face and then even imagines this ridiculous story of how he got trapped in the mat. I'm a very open-minded guy, and I know things can happen, and there have been people trapped in vents, trapped behind furnaces, and died in my own city here. So I know that these accidents can happen.
Wow.
But the thing is nothing like this, nothing where the body is mutilated and the motive seems to be ridiculous, and the supposition that his shoe fell in there. Well, both of his shoes must have fell in if he was found with no shoes. So I would love to hear the official, I'd love to hear the official report. Love to see what again, it seems to be some very suspicious things where nobody noticed this person missing. The father was the person that said, okay, he didn't come back from school. I think you guys got quite the tiger by the tail here, and I want to commend you, gentlemen, for your good investigative work here, and thank you for bringing this story to me and, in turn, bringing it to an audience. So I want to thank you very much for this very, very informative interview, gentlemen.
Well, I thank you both, and have a great afternoon, great evening, and I appreciate your time.
And, Dan, thank you for bringing this to the attention of the international public. It's your courage that makes these things happen. Thank you very much, sir.
Well, thank you, Fred. It's always great to be able to speak with you, and thank you again, friend Rosen and Beau Webster, for your work. And, of course, you're going to keep me updated on this, because I'm sure this story is going to have a lot more to it than we've even could even imagine. So I want to thank you very much, and look forward to hearing.
You're on the top of the list. Okay.
Dan, thank you very much again. I really appreciate it. And, Fred, as usual, thank you very much.
My pleasure, Beau.
And
gentlemen, have a good night.
Thank you.
As well.
You too.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.